So good morning, everyone. We will start the session today. So thanks for joining the session, which is organized by CEF E-Invoicing. So today the session will be about SMEs and private sector onboarding. So just a couple of rules before we start the session. So I'll ask you to all keep your microphone muted. Whenever you will have a question or comments to share, then I'll invite you to do it on the right-hand side of your screen in the chat. And then one of my colleagues will be in charge of reading them for you, and then we could react accordingly. If you have any problem with your audio, there is a little icon at the bottom of the screen, the red one. I invite you to check there. So as I said, today is a session organized by CEF E-Invoicing, and we will mainly talk about SMEs and private sector onboarding. So here is the agenda for today. So the policy owner of E-Invoicing will be in charge of opening the session. I will also set the guidance for the session today and talk about the settings. Then we will move on to the first section, which is about onboarding actions for SMEs in the private sector, initiated from national governments. Then the second section will be about onboarding actions for SMEs and the private sector from the private sector itself and associations. Then the third part will be about CEF E-Invoicing services and next steps. I will present myself. And then the policy owner, again, will do the closing remark for the session. So today here are the European Commission speakers. So Irena Rivière-Osipov, so from DG Grow and also policy owner for E-Invoicing. Then we will have Christian Rasmussen, E-Invoicing CEF expert. Caroline Corne today will be in charge of reading your comments and questions in the chat. So CEF E-Invoicing project manager. And myself, Solène Drugeau, who will facilitate the session for you today, the CEF E-Invoicing stakeholder onboarding manager. So now, with no further ado, I'll leave the floor to Irena Rivière for the policy highlights and EU member states' achievements.
Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm really glad to share this moment with you. I'm really glad to share this beautiful morning, and I am really glad to be in front of you, in front of this beautiful gathering today. And we have you, and we have a panel of selected speakers, and ce sera un régal. This session is possible thanks to the excellent work of Solène, to the dedicated passion of Caro, and to the great expert work of Christian and Martin. And though I have to be brief, in the benefit of time, let me share with you something personal. I have a strong longing, I start having a very strong longing to see people, to sit with people, to talk to you face to face. So I would love to see all of you, 100 people we are here today around this discussion table, and be with you and sit with you in the room. And I trust it will happen soon. Let's have a bet in 6 months. I trust something will happen in 6 months, no later. And I'd like to tell you that we are here in the spirit of sharing experience today. We will hear from the public sector, and we'll hear mostly from the private sector what is happening. The purpose is to share experience towards what was done in onboarding and invoicing, and not to make it a commercial exercise. And I'm grateful for you to be here, because you spent your days in meetings. And today, I'm really looking forward to make this moment a fruitful moment for you. But why, finally and fundamentally? Why are you here? Why am I here? I dare say that I got inspired from a survey in Facebook last week. So you might have taken that survey. And one of the questions was, is Facebook important to the world? And why is Facebook important to the world? So I dare launch this question to you. Is e-invoicing important to the world? And why is e-invoicing important to the world? And there I invite you to, I'm really looking for these answers. Take a moment now. Think of it. And I really invite you to put your answer in the Q&A part. And without delaying much further and preventing the wonderful discussion, because I'm eager to hear with you. I'm really here to tell you something important. I'm here to tell you something which is fundamental for the discussions today, and to tell you that there is a shift right now. There is a shift. There is a shift in the energy in the world. I think everybody can feel it. And there is a shift in the direction of e-invoicing. And this is the one I would like to talk to you about now. The EU policy in e-invoicing started as a policy based on B2G, business to government, because we decided to do what EU knows to do best, to work with governments. And to work with governments to mobilize them, to regulate them, and we asked all public administration governments to ensure also that all public administrations, they accept electronic invoices. And in this journey, we have reached milestones. We have reached 2 milestones in April 2019 and in April 2020, where now all public administrations are due to accept electronic invoices. And we are in a situation now where all member states have transposed the directive. And this is very good, the legislation is there. What is happening in terms of implementation? What is the invoicing landscape right now? The invoicing landscape right now is completely, I would say, radically different from what it was 5 years ago. I'm saying 5 years ago because 5 years ago the directive was adopted in 2014. But though it is not the most common used, still e-invoicing means, or e-invoicing means today, and I think you share the same knowledge with me, and if you know it differently, please tell it to me. And it is certainly not in all European countries, and is certainly not in all economic sectors. The landscape is, however, radically different, as I said. We have e-invoicing now all over in the economy, prevailing in all IT systems especially. And from this, a strong interest from the tax people. Yes, because it is therefore they are interested in the transition. So what they are interested in is regulating the tasks aspects. And working in TaxSud, I was in a seminar with them, in a fiscally seminar in September, and I was happy to be there. I was passionately listening to that discussion. And I got out of the room, of the virtual room, because it was still virtual, with the conclusion: we need to be vigilant. We need to be vigilant there, because the perspective is different. And now I'd like to tell you about the change, and the big change. There is a change now, and this is due to happen soon. And this is in the orientation of e-invoicing policy. The EU policy of this moment, where e-invoicing becomes a new economic parameter. I really like calling it like this for companies. The e-invoicing policy will shift towards B2B. The e-invoicing approach, the policy approach, will be in the broader framework of the SME policy. So this is why I must say that this is excellent news. I'm really happy about it. I contributed to it, and I'm happy that we made this collective decision, because I think this is the right direction. So this is why today we are at the right moment, at the right spot to speak about it. I invite you all to contribute. I remind you that this is the last event for e-invoicing this year, so your last chance to contribute to this question. And without further ado, I invite you to this wonderful discussion. I wish a fruitful discussion.
Thanks a lot, Irina. Thanks for this wonderful opening. Then now, Christian, I will leave the floor to you and explain the first exercise of the session today.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Glad to see so many here. Before we go to the actual slides and the presentation, can you bring up the presentation again? Sorry, it was a little bit quick.
Sorry.
We will ask you a few questions, and for this purpose, we're using a tool called Mentimeter. In order for you to participate, and we hope all of you will, you take your phone and open the camera. If you have an iPhone or an Android, you should be able to open the camera on the phone. Just point at the screen towards the QR code, and there will be a drop down on the camera screen where it says you can open a link. This link will go directly into the survey that we're conducting, and I'll share my screen in a short while. If you can't open it like that, you can go into menti.com and use the code that was illustrated at the bottom. So let me just share it again.
Yeah.
Thank you. So basically, open your camera, points toward this QR code, or open a browser, even in your computer, go into menti.com and use this code that you have down here. We'll just give you 30 seconds to connect. And then I will share my screen instead. So the first question is, and we can see 26 of you have joined. The question is your organization public or private? So you just punch in what you feel is the most appropriate answer. 34, 36, 37. Just give you a bit of time. There's 5 questions. 38. Okay, so we have a towards the private sector. 40. Okay, it seems to be pretty clear. So we'll shift to the next question. Are you representing a service provider? Yes or no? So I have quite a lot of yeses there. All right. We continue with the next question. Does your organization exchange invoices with public contracting authorities? There are 3 options here. You can actually answer more than one. Yes, we exchange invoices nationally. Yes, we exchange invoices internationally. No, we do not exchange invoices with public contracting authorities.
Beautiful interface for this Menti. Nice. I haven't seen it before.
Okay. And next question. How do you see your own level of readiness? Are you able to comply to the directive? Are you gaining knowledge, building knowledge? Are you exactly expanding the usage? Are you already taking advantage of e-invoicing? Or are you in fact working on the next step, meaning moving beyond just electronic e-invoicing? Well, it's very positive to see so many that are working on the next steps. That's good. We would like to hear all your input. Perhaps also if there's some best practices and lessons learned that we can share among all of us. Great. And the final question is, what is your opinion on the private sector onboarding in your country or also on EU-wide? Is it active and efficient, active not too efficient, or mostly inactive? So let's try to be honest. And don't worry, we don't have any registrations on who answered what. That'll come later. Okay, so this also pretty much is the picture that we have gathered from the different member states as well. There's room for improvement, for sure. Some are very active and efficient. Great. Thank you so much for your participation in this survey. So will you bring back the, I'll just stop sharing that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just need some seconds, but yeah.
And the questions will stand open for some time. So those of you who are watching this presentation on the recorded side will be able to also answer a week after this session has been recorded. This means that you'll be able to fill in your details as well.
Normally the presentation should appear now.
Yeah, it's there.
Great. So Christian,
Do you want to do the introduction?
I'll let you continue with the first part and bounce back on the result that we just got from the Mentimeter exercise.
Yes, thank you so much, Celine. You're controlling the slides, right? Yes. Okay. So onboarding access for SMEs and private sector. Generally, when we first looked into the directive, there was a number of benefits where the directive would come directly into place. And also when looking at how the landscape were just 10 years ago before the directive, and now how it's looking 1 to 2 years into the transposition. In general, there are different benefits that have been derived, not only breaking down the barriers between the different e-invoicing networks in Europe, but also in really getting the last mile on both automation, optimizing the interoperability solutions, simplifications of e-cross-bordering, and in general, the payment processes. Many of the countries have had their own reasons why they should, of course, go into this, not only on a governmental level, on a central level, but also on the sub-central level. And each country have also been approaching the transposition of the directive in their own way. Can you change the slide, please? There are 3 common ways to transpose the directive. Should not come as a big surprise. One is as if from the directive with no further requirements, which means that, of course, the public entities have to stand ready for receiving the invoices which complies with the European standard, and it comes with the above threshold procurement contracts. There are no requirements for suppliers to actually send it. And most member states also accept invoices related to below EU threshold contracts. So this is one common approach that we've seen in the majority of the member states. Then we also have as is from directive with additional policies and requirements, which means that additional rules can be applied to the invoice, such as a contractual requirement or similar approach. And then the last one is, of course, that legal requirements on the supplier to send, which means that you are imposing further requirements to it by introducing mandatory invoicing to the public sector by law, meaning banning paper. And some countries are even moving towards business-to-business transposition or legislation. Next slide, please. If we look at the broad landscape in Europe, we also see that there are some different trends out there. Each country have their own flavors. Each country had their own legacy. Some countries didn't have anything. And it also depends on what legacy systems was already in place. So we have a number of countries where we have centralized platforms. This is where we see that national portal solutions can act as a hub where either the suppliers go in, upload their or fill in their invoices, and it can also be a commercial closed platform, often chosen by the buyer. These are, of course, not the most interoperable ones, but a number of countries do have them in place, and they have made them interoperable by adopting a number of building blocks from either the CEF building blocks or, for instance, a PEPL, vice versa. Then we also have the band providers, the old band providers providing especially Edifact. Those are also very dominant in the market there, especially for the larger retailers, larger suppliers. They already have agreed methods for exchanging invoices, standards for exchanging business messages, and also agreed transport protocols. So we also see that. Naturally, we cannot come around it, but PEPL have been in the recent years more and more dominating, which means that they have a contractual framework, they have a PKI solution to ensure the trust on both the technical and legal aspects, and this is a solution that around half of the countries have chosen. And then there are a number of new opportunities coming around that it would be interesting to follow, such as the global interoperability framework set forth by the ESPA community. Next slide, please. But onboarding the SMEs and how the different countries have been progressing has a large effect on the SMEs. It essentially, if the member states are not clear, for instance, in the communication, if they don't build a community around it, if they do not make the solution software available, it will be a tricky process for the SMEs to be onboarded. We see that the best progress in countries where we have the highest efficiency, the highest availability, and the highest adoption rates have all of these components cleared out for the SMEs. And we also see that the SMEs are, of course, much more inclined to go in, because it's easier for them, it's cheaper for them, and they can have one approach to reach all their customers in the nation, and perhaps even cross-border in the region. Change the slide, please. Recently, we conducted online studies of the member states, and we found that although also some of the countries are moving towards, for instance, PEPL, they still have a strong legacy around the different legacy systems. And this means that for these countries that are here on the list that we recently visited, we found that they, of course, still have the centralized platforms, they still have the integrational part, and they might not be up to speed on all the roadmaps, and they might still lack some critical components. We do, however, see convergence towards the same kind of standards, and that's, of course, positive for the SMEs, and especially on the cross-border level. So this is quite good. Next slide, please.
Thanks a lot, Christian. So now it is the time for the first open talk. So it will be about onboarding actions for SMEs and private sector from national governments. So how we will do it? So we have two speakers for this open talk. So we are happy to welcome Lars Enberg, who is an eInvoicing national representative for Sweden, and then Daniel Morodin, who will represent Romania today. So each speaker will have 5 minutes to do their speech about the different initiatives taken from the government. And then we will have 10 minutes for a Q&A session, during which you can ask all your questions and put all your comments in the chat. And my colleague Caroline will be here to read them for you. Whenever you have a question, please make sure that you write the name of the speaker you address it to, so that either Lars or Daniel could reply to you. So now I'll leave the microphone to Lars for the first 5-minute speech.
Thank you. I hope you all can hear me, and I'm on video as well.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, nice to see you digital. My name is Lars Engberg. I'm working at DIG, Agency for Digital Government here in Sweden. We are quite newly established authority. And the focus on this area the last year has been the transport of the EU Directive regarding e-invoicing and implement it into Swedish law. We are also PEPL authority here in Sweden. In Sweden, the public sector, the contracting authorities, was very well prepared for implementation of the EU Directive into Swedish law. Both central government agencies and almost all municipalities have used e-invoicing for several years. So e-invoicing wasn't really anything new for us here in Sweden or in the B2G market. Even the B2B market was very well known by the e-invoicing as well. But we have been working with local format for a couple of years, since 90s, early 2000s. We have been working with local formats, Edifact, XML, etc., that we have to upgrade now into more cross-border formats and more standard formats. In Sweden, the law of e-invoicing in public sector entered into force April 1st, 2019. Causes covers the public procurement above and below the EU threshold, and including the direct procurement as well. Of course, then the public sector must be able to receive and process e-invoicing according to the European standard. And the e-invoicing that fulfill the European standard in Sweden is the Peppol e-invoice or Peppol BIS Billing 3, which is the one we recommend for the public sector and the suppliers. But we have also in the law that it's mandatory for suppliers to send e-invoice according to the European standard. And the possibilities are, if the supplier don't follow the law, they can impose fine to private companies, but we haven't been doing that so far. Instead, we focus a lot of communication, information, etc. So we have more a soft approach to implement this. Of course, there are some exceptions to the law where you don't have to send the invoice. For example, invoices that handles national security, etc. And there are also a possibility to have bilateral agreements regarding all the formats, but we see a big increase of the Peppol invoice and the traffic over the Peppol network. As said, the law e-invoicing public sector started 19, but we have also made a complement to the law that all the contracting entities in public sector, government, municipalities, regions, etc., must be registered in Peppol for a minimum of Peppol BIS Billing 3. And that is quite important because that means that the supplier know that the public sector are ready to receive the e-invoicing over Peppol. So they could focus on that instead of some technical issues or technical setups. And that's take me to the next step then. It's to make this efficient, I think it's the communication has to be easy. And there is a lot of service available out there. Peppol, from our point of view, Peppol provides both a secure network and a format. So we could speak more on the upside than on the technical details. And we could make a quite good package together with a service provider.
Thanks a lot, Lars. Thanks a lot for your speech. Then I will hang the mic to Daniel Omoridit for Romania.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to meet you all. I'm coming from Romania indeed, yet I'm coming from the private sector. I'm not officially representing the government. However, I'm very well aware of all the processes that happened in the country in the last years in relation with electronic invoicing. And also I'm well aware and involved in what happens now and what is planned for the immediate future. In Romania, the private industry, and I would say the private IT industry at large, not just the digital service providers in relation with electronic invoicing, all of us understood that introducing the electronic invoicing is actually a systemic change. And is something that could benefit us all as citizens and also us all as players in the IT industry, not only in interacting as service providers to send, transport, receive, process invoicing, but also in supporting all the other processes that happened either in the financial or commercial area of our operations, the operations of the companies, and as well into the administrative sector. So that is why we took over the education of the market and helped our government, and we are continuing to do it, in order to have a coherent public policy and to have a proper transposal of the directive. Actually, Romania as a whole is quite a lagging behind country. It was only 2 months ago, in September, when Romania finally has transposed the directive. So I'm very glad when Irena said that all the countries have transposed the directive. I'm very glad that finally Romania is between them. However, yet we do not have a centralized approach for the technical implementation. Right now, the status is that after 1 year of working together with our government, and supporting the organization of two workshops, technical workshops, which were done together with the representative of CEF in Romania. We've managed now to go in the next phase, which is the development of a SIOS. The development of a SIOS, as all the regulation framework, is to the Ministry of Finance in Romania, while the implementation, technical implementation, is to the National Agency for Digital Transformation, which has formed as well a committee composed of private industry representatives to help the authority and also to help the ministry into drafting and designing the policy and also designing the technical architecture. Right now, we are in a moment in which, let's say, we are in the starting blocks of e-invoicing in Romania. There is no legacy. There is no prior education. There is pretty much no awareness, both in the public sector and also in the private sector. And this is all that we'll have to do, but we take it as a private industry that we have to do it together with our government. And we are in the discussions, and I expect that in the near future we will have at least an interim IT solution or technical solution for the delivery of electronic invoicing towards the public authority, the contracting authorities, while in the same time, both the government and also the private sector is very much interested in introducing e-invoicing in B2B. Actually, I would have to say that the Ministry of Finance is more interested into driving the country towards the e-invoicing B2B mandating as soon as possible for the benefits related to the reduction of VAT fraud and the enhancement of collections, so going towards the real-time reporting as soon as possible. And of course, the DSPs and the IT industry at large is also very much interesting, because what we see is a huge new market opening for all the players that are in the game. I believe that we're in a good position, although lagging behind, but in a good position of actually building up something together, the private and the public sector, in order to advance the invoicing in the country and actually move along from now on, I hope, quite swiftly, quite rapidly. So that's in a nutshell what's going on in Romania and what I expect to happen in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. Now I will leave the floor to Caroline, who will read the questions for you, the participant who barely shared some inputs in the chat. And I'll let Lars or Daniel reply to the questions.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. And
Yes.
indeed, we first have a couple of questions for Lars. So I'll go through them as we receive them. So the first question was from Tim. Lars, are you looking to supplier mandates? As you are looking, to supplier mandates, have you engaged with finance system providers to support digital exchange?
Yeah, I thought about that. I saw that question in the chat, and I thought about it. I'm not really engaged with finance system. What we are focusing on the moment is only the e-invoicing, and of course we have support for the system providers and the system suppliers that are supporting the e-invoicing process, and that's the other step in the e-procurement as well. When we come to the finance system, from my point of view, that is more transaction and account statement and that kind. So I'm not really with you on that question, but we have a good support to the system providers, and that, from my point of view, that is very important, because I see this is as a marketing collaboration where the infrastructure based on standards has to work very close with the service provider, because the service provider have the tools, and that has to be quite good wrapped and packaged when we show them to the end users, and that are more important towards the SMEs, I think. I don't think maybe that is the question, or that answer to the question. But if you want, you can have my email address and please send me a mail later and I can come back to you. Is that okay?
Indeed, thank you, Lars. I mean, this is definitely the conversation can continue also outside of this webinar, but as you know, of this session. But as you know, we also have the user community that you can use to keep the conversation, let's say, with multiple participants, if that's the wish, of course. So I would go then to the second question, which was from Gerard, still addressed to Lars. Are you using the PEPL directory to facilitate onboarding?
Yeah, as a PEPL authority, and I know a lot of service providers are using the PEPL directory as well, but as a PEPL authority, we use the PEPL directory to see what kind of format that are supported within our jurisdiction and how the numbers of receiver are growing. It's growing rapidly. So we have a little bit problem to get good numbers from PEPL, but PEPL directory is a quite important information that we look into. And I know in PEPL as well, there is a discussion ongoing if PEPL directory is going to be mandatory or not. But PEPL directory, I think that is good, a very good tool that we use for some onboarding. But we have a local onboarding process in Sweden. When we take in a new service provider, we have some steps that you have to pass through. And I know every PEPL authority do in Sweden that we are glad to share. And you can find it on dig.se as well.
Okay, thank you, Lars. There are a couple more questions for you, but I'll go to Daniel first to give enough time to everybody. So the question to Daniel is, does Romania find opportunities in cooperating with other EU governments, like receiving feedback, etc.?
While I cannot speak for the government itself, Romania should definitely be interested in that, especially since the envisioned strategy on medium term is to mandating the e-invoicing in B2B, and through this also to settle exactly the models for the real-time reporting, for the clearance mechanisms, and something that we support as an industry to advance in establishing a strategy, a coherent medium and long-term strategy towards CTC. So it's a definite thing that I believe that should be thought of, learning what others have done and understanding the models, and also understanding the ways in which other governments have incentivized the players, the stakeholders in the country. I clearly support this as well as the industry does. We do have, however, communication with CEF, as some of you do know, in relation in particular with the next steps, the SIUS and so on.
Indeed, thank you so much, Daniel. So I go back to a question that was addressed to Lars earlier on. Did you receive any feedback already from enterprises sharing the benefits of e-invoicing?
Yeah, we have been working, the market in Sweden, the enterprises, both the public and the private, has already bought into the e-invoice, because we have been working with this for several years now. But what's happened recently is we're starting to make it more standardized and using one format instead of 3 locals, etc. But what we can see is that as a municipalities that have or a government that's starting to receive a lot of e-invoicing, suddenly they start to want to send out them as well. So this is spreading. So it's just only, of course, if you're starting to receive e-invoicing, a natural step will be that you want to send e-invoicing as well, because you see the upside. And I think this is like a snowball that's starting to roll. You have all the e-procurement value change that's open up. And for a lot of the companies, probably the e-invoice is something to start with. But you have the whole value chain that one day probably going to be digitalized. And there is a lot to gain from here. But I come back to this, that this is a marketing collaboration, that the structure, the infrastructure have to have a really close information and discussion with the service provider. And that's I think a key thing that we have here in Sweden is we have something called SFTI, Single Face to Industry. It's a joint initiative in the Swedish public sector to promote and facilitate e-procurement, and there has been a lot of focus on the e-invoicing last year then. But the aim of SFTI is to recommend standards and work with the public sector, suppliers, and IT providers as well, with online test tools, testbed, etc., to make it easy for the end users to onboard the solution. So the end user shouldn't be the one to take the discussion regarding the technique. That should be solved in good time ahead.
Okay, thank you. And indeed, we'll also be looking at it, continuing to follow up on the benefits of e-invoicing as we're writing benefits analysis also together with you. I think we are just 1 minute. There are 2 more questions, but I wonder if we have still the time to take them. There was a last question, which was, how did Sweden build support from businesses and SMEs for mandating invoicing? So if you want to take that question still very quickly, otherwise I'm looking at Solène also, who's the timekeeper, to tell us when to move on.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that, but we will have to move on. We need to be mindful about time. Just an information, so all the questions and comments that you're sharing in the chat at the moment that are not tackled during the session will be taken, and we will reply to it in a written format. We will build a document that we will complete with the help of the speakers and also safe invoicing experts. So please, you can continue sharing, and then we will come back to you with the replies. So now, thank you very much, Daniel and Lars, for your cooperation and precious information. We will now move on to the second part about onboarding actions for SMEs and private sector, from the private sector itself and associations. So I'll leave the floor and microphone to Christian again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Celine. So when looking at what the SME should do, you have to understand what the normal characteristics are for the small and medium-sized enterprises, and especially the micro SMEs that have a low number of invoices. So most of them send very low volumes of invoices per year, and all of them are pretty much using standardized software packages for ERP systems. Often they come with a set of services that they can use from the service providers, and this means that also the service providers play a crucial role in onboarding of the SMEs. Again, the incentives of going into this pretty much have to be around saving time and money, but it's not very significant, and we have to be honest around this. Larger receivers, of course, have larger benefits, so the more you send, the better it is. And also, for the SMEs, we have to also understand that moving towards full electronic structured data brings some value, but for many years, and many of them have already been using PDFs or email-based invoices. So really, the gain for going into electronic invoices can seem to be quite difficult. And secondly, most of the SMEs have limited knowledge. They have limited technical capabilities around, for instance, CIS, standard, transport protocols, etc. So they would be relying on getting support from service providers in order to be onboarded and adopting the standards. Can you change the slide, please? Thank you. I think it has a step in, yeah. So this is of course coming back to one of the last questions in the questionnaire, because where are the SMEs and the private sectors located today in each country? We have found that even though that the country can be more advanced, expanding the usage, building knowledge, or even taking advance, or taking the next steps of something we have seen in some of the countries, the SMEs and also some of the subcentral entities on governmental level is perhaps not that advanced. And this means that that we have to understand what is needed for the SMEs in reality to be onboarded. Take the next slide, thanks. And then climb this ladder. As a supplier, if you want to be in the game, you of course have to be able to send an invoice in either of the two syntaxes, being UBL or cross-industry invoices, which means that you have the means to both receive and message the file, but also have a solution-based process invoice. This means that on the receiving side, there should be a system in place where the supplier can connect to and submit the invoices. It's important, of course, to take the interoperability aspect. Just change one more, and it's also good to align with whatever other countries that you have with the buyer side. The ambition level, of course, differs quite a lot in different member states, and this means that, for instance, more advanced solutions, the higher you get up into the ladder, is seldomly seen, but we have some of the countries who have gained a lot from this. Next slide, please. You can just flip it through slowly. So in general, we see that a few suppliers send a lot of invoices, and these are often the ones who have the capabilities of enabling themselves. Then on the second level, we have those who are let's say the medium advanced SMEs, where they are using either integrated solutions up against the SME systems, but also perhaps they have their own technical capabilities, for instance, integrating up against some of the communities, PEPL, and some of the centralized solutions as well. And then the long tail, which is the majority characteristic from most of the countries is that more than 90% of all the SMEs are micro SMEs, and these are the long tail where they send very, very few invoices that are really in place for this, and they have, of course, not necessarily the technical advantages. And for the last two here, if you click one more. No, sorry. Okay, so it's an old slide. So for the last two here, this is where the service providers are coming in, because if we want to leave nobody behind and onboard everybody, we need to have different tools available. So often you would see that for the long tail, the service provider, this SMEs, in order for them to be onboarded, you need to have the right set of tools. For instance, national portals, online one-stop entry portals where you can go in, write your invoice, issue it, and transmit it, while as the other ones are doing it for themselves. So there needs to be a clear strategy, not only on a member state level, but also from the service provider side, on which tools do we want to provide in order to get all the different SMEs in place. So it's not necessarily something that the SMEs can decide themselves, but there are solutions in place, and those that are the most advanced countries would have solutions in place for all these three segments of SMEs.
Thanks a lot, Christian. Now is the time for the second open talk. So here again, the onboarding action for SMEs and private sector from the private sector and associations. So for here, the same rules as before apply. So here again, after the speech of each speaker, you will have the possibility to ask your questions in the chat. Here again, by writing their name, so Caroline could address your question to the right speaker. So for this open talk number 2, we have Jürgen Soestert, founder of the DigiCrowd e-invoicing community. Then Daniel Morodin here with the status of the vice president at the CLUG IT cluster. Then we have Bojan Mijuskovic, so project development professional and special in the financial services, also invoicing solution provider. And then last but not least, so Charles Bryant, e-invoicing expert, but also Secretary General of ISPA, which is the European Invoicing Service Provider Association. Now, Jürgen, I'll leave the floor to you.
Hello to you all.
Hi.
Hi. Do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. Hello to you all. I'm Jurgen from Codabox, and I will give you an explanation on the role of the DigiCrowd e-invoicing community in Belgium. I will emphasize the role of the document service providers and the onboarding of SMEs and companies. DigiCrowd was founded in 2019 by Codabox, Sage, Winbooks, and Kluwer. Together, those four companies cover 80% of all Belgian SMEs. End of 2019, we organized a roundtable in Brussels where we brought together 20 stakeholders. Either they were a big sender, that's how we call B2B suppliers, which send a large volume of invoices, or they were receivers, that's how we call the SMEs and their accountants. In that session, the receivers handed over an open letter with the request of 50,000 SMEs towards the suppliers to start sending UBL invoices over the PEPL network. Only 3 months later, in the beginning of 2020, we repeated this roundtable, and the number of participants grew to 70 parties. But more importantly, we received the full support of our Minister of Finance, our current Prime Minister, Alexander De Croo. He publicly supported the DigiCrowd initiative and stated that it's time to think about on how e-invoicing can be made available to all companies in Belgium. One solution he proposed was to make sending on PEPL mandatory for every company or SME. The aftermovie and conclusions of this roundtable you will find right now in the chat posted by my colleague Tom Blight, English subtitles available. In this summary, we share the vision of the different stakeholders, both senders, receivers, as well as the Belgian government. But why did we launch DigiCrowd, and what were the challenges we encountered in regards to e-invoicing onboarding? In Belgium, we had two big issues. There was a big fear on the sending side. Will the invoice be delivered correctly? And more importantly, will it be paid on time? On the receiving end, companies feared they would not receive all their invoices and wondered how they would receive this e-invoice. Our first challenge was to find a solution that would take away those fears on both sides. Okay. Our solution was increasing the convenience to send and receive e-invoices while making sure there's enough volume to make it interesting for SMEs to switch to e-invoicing. We believe the network always wins, and the fact that we have quadrupled our community in only 6 months proves that this open philosophy was able to change the mindset and accelerate adoption rate. To achieve this, we focused on our onboarding activities for SMEs on 4 different axes. Axis 1, the Belgian accountants. As DigiCrowd was founded by 4 players in the accounting industry, we mainly leverage our network of 3,400 accountants. These accountants service 180,000 Belgian SMEs, so our strategy focuses on onboarding the SMEs through their accountant. As the accountant plays more and more the role of counselor and CFO, he is in a perfect position to convince the SMEs to make the switch. On the one hand, he helps his customer, and on the other hand, he makes his own life easy by automating a part of his accounting processes. Important note is that through the accountant, we obtained a clear mandate to receive e-invoices for the SME in question, which is an important element for our second axis to onboard SMEs. Axis 2, big Belgian B2B suppliers that send a large volume of e-invoices to SMEs. Today, we have about 11,000 mandates of the SME. This is an important volume which helps us convince big B2B suppliers to send their e-invoices via PEPL. In fact, we leverage the mandates to show the suppliers that their customers are waiting to receive e-invoices, which immediately takes away the fear of not getting paid. Axis 3, our open model. At DigiCrowd, we also believe both sender and receiver should be able to choose the party they want to work with. In the case of the supplier, this means a free choice of the service provider to send on the network. In the case of the receiver, this means a free choice of the software in which they receive those real digital invoices. We offer that convenience and freedom, avoiding SMEs to make investments or choices that limit their future plans. Axis 4, and the last one, the importance of connecting the service providers. Finally, I want to stress the role of the service providers within DigiCrowd. We are convinced that we are not in competition with other service providers. Collaborating is crucial to succeed, and it also fits perfectly with the network always wins philosophy, which we value at DigiCrowd. We work together as partners to ensure more e-invoices are delivered to SMEs and accountants. By connecting different access points, the volume of available e-invoices increases exponentially, which is to the benefit of all stakeholders: SMEs, accountants, software suppliers, and of course, the other service providers. As a result, we doubled the number of e-invoices we received over our access point in only 6 months. Today, we already delivered 200,000 e-invoices from 800 suppliers to 8,000 SME customers and their accountants. We can tell from everything that the shift is happening, and we truly hope we get some support from national and international government by making e-invoicing mandatory. We also made a nice video on this, and you will find it right now in the chat and on the CEF page. English subtitles available. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Jürgen. So talking about the SAFE page is actually the user community. So I invite you all to visit that page indeed. Daniel, the floor is yours again.
Thank you very much. As you already know, I've told you a bit earlier that we actually do not have in Romania running platform, a national platform for e-invoicing. However, both the private industry as also the institutions have prepared. And we have carried out discussions with a lot of stakeholders of either the central government, contracting authorities, DSPs, and also companies, from large to small, from to SMEs or to micro enterprises. And out of these discussions, we believe that we have a set of ideas that would allow a quick and effective onboarding of SMEs, and that does not relate and does not require a mandating. I personally do not believe that a mandating is something that is necessary for an SME, for the SME onboarding, and should not be conditioned by it. I'm a very big fan of the bottom-up approach, which is also a cohesive, collaborative, associative approach. And in order for us to see the adoption in any country, not only in ours, I believe that we have to have several aspects figured out and solved. The first one is a coherent national strategy on medium and long term, coherent and well communicated, with a clear action plan, and with the ability of the central authorities to work together with the industry. Let's say in a private-public partnership, which would be ideal, but at least to allow and open the access of the service providers into the game. And in terms of education, which is crucial, capital for the onboarding of SMEs, I believe that the private industry can do at least as much as the government could do, if indeed the private industry itself is taken as a partner in the game. That's the first point. The next point that I would make is that in order to onboard the small and medium enterprises, and especially the micro enterprises, which are not technologically aware, and are not finding an immediate benefit out of this conversion, we have to make sure that we have low entry barrier. And by this, I would even say zero barrier in terms of cost. So there should be no cost associated with this change, no financial cost, but also no process cost and no effort cost. So even though this is a challenge indeed, but in order for us to see the natural onboarding, we'll have to be able to provide this. And that is why I believe that sending and receiving of e-invoicing should always be free. It's up to the ecosystem, to the stakeholders, to realize what else they can build on top in order to create added value which could be monetized, but not the very action of sending or receiving. And another point that I would make is that the SMEs should be incentivized. They should be incentivized first and foremost by the state. through various incentives that are also exemplified by various states who have pioneered this, like, for example, prioritized reimbursement of VAT or deduction of some taxes and so on. But incentivizing is something which should be taken very seriously for each state who wants to have natural onboarding. Of course, two other points that I would say are ideal would be for the DSPs, for the IT industry to work together. Because of course there is competition. No, it's normal to be competition, and it's a natural thing, and it's a healthy thing. However, we have to understand and to balance that just by keeping the market fragmented and just by competing within each other as a service providers, we will hinder the mass adoption. So we have to find ways to associate. In a way, the DigiGrow crowd example is quite an interesting one for us as well. And another point that I saw coming in debates in various countries, and of course at the European level, is the actual format. So the actual format, in my view, can only be one, the EN one. No other way could lead us to a proper adoption. So we are in Romania fortunate that we do not have legacy, but even the countries who have legacy have to find ways in which to leave the legacy behind and move to the only standard. So these are the points that I would make as ones that I believe are very important for the mass adoption, and I truly hope, and we as an industry in Romania work on that, to actually show that this path is possible and that voluntary, natural onboarding and adoption is feasible. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Daniel, for the very interesting info. Now I'll leave the floor to Boyan. You can do this.
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone. This is Boyan speaking from Cyprus. I represent an automation platform and a solution provider, and we aspire to be a transparent e-invoicing conversion and secure delivery network with a smooth supplier onboarding and payment options. Our focus is on some specific industries, mainly food and beverage production and wholesale distribution, some hospitality and medical supply sectors. And through our research methods, we use a direct approach to some key representative suppliers on the market in Cyprus and the region, as well as some large enterprises as their partners, like buyers, with the mix of medium-sized businesses from different sectors. What we found is that overall, most common challenges these businesses currently face are resistance to change, which is based on no clear mandate or no legal obligation to adopt pretty much anything. There's general fear of new technologies and general lack of trust. And often on business partners on the other side have a problem to cope with the modernization efforts, as they still rely on manual paper methods, actually. So the second thing is that there are heavily customized ERP solutions, which definitely increase the implementation time, and partially implemented ERP solutions. Some vendors try to offer this kind of thing and focus only on one specific problem and get ignored by the businesses. Finally, there is a friction with the payment methods, payment processing. For example, paper checks are still present and highly regarded in this region. And that's likely due to the lack of openness in terms of open banking, but that's probably a different subject altogether. What we found is that the key piece of business onboarding strategy is to present and demonstrate clear benefits, like what would an SME gain by embracing e-invoicing and other automation technologies. In other words, provide solutions that reduce human dependency in the flow of an invoice, like delivery, verification, and processing. Streamline payment processing and offer like a high-level operations visibility, like an overview. Have an ERP agnostic integrations as well. Then take off that manual tax compliance and reporting burden from a daily to-do lists. Finally, a symmetrical implementation project implemented. For example, closing the cycle with the other party involves both parties, buyer and suppliers, to create a collaborative environment usually yields some results. The way I see the e-invoicing landscape today is there is a variety of different e-invoicing methods and exchange protocols and networks, which is a reality in Europe and globally. I don't necessarily think that such variety is bad, in the sense that each of those systems work in a very specific way, while they have the same goal, same outcome, which is as simple as take the financial data, like order, invoice, or any other document from my system and securely transfer it to my customer system. We can see that this today works quite well in some countries like France, Belgium, Nordics, and some others. Standardization with mandates is definitely the way to go, but I'll advise a careful approach there. So by careful approach, I mean not trying to impose any kind of a hardcore re-architecture or rebuilding of the core of those existing platforms or networks. Instead, to provide an interoperability requirements in form of like a commonly agreed standards like European norm, where such different networks would implement a common protocol so they could all like speak the same language, regardless of the internal design or implementation. And then ultimately connect to a single network of networks. And as Lars mentioned earlier, PEPL or GIF are very well placed to be just that. Also, as an added value, this approach would require a zero adjustment of the national existing systems, which are currently in place, and hence maintain that level of adoption. As for the drivers of the standardization, I think they should ideally provide incentives that enhance this interoperability between these existing national networks. And then for the SMEs, through this cross-border market expansion, like, for example, opportunities for suppliers from Belgium working with buyers from Romania and vice versa, in a very transparent way that is no different than in case they would work with the local partners or even local public authorities. So to sum up, in my view, I don't see how such goal can be achieved without a close collaboration between the Commission and the solution providers in each member state. Solution providers are the ones that have that market expertise and reach to the different industry verticals. So the goal is to capitalize on already existing relationships and trust. As for the challenges, they will always be there. I think, especially when we talk about smaller SMEs, and we could see that earlier from the graph. But if the core market picks it up and businesses are motivated enough and actually incentivized in the right way, I think that would definitely lower the barrier of entry for many. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Now I'll leave the floor to Charles.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's Charles Bryant here. I am Secretary General of the European E-Invoicing Service Providers Association. We have around 80 service providers operating. Be clear, we're a classic trade association. Our job is to represent our members, is to provide cooperation forums. The service providers are in the market. They are the people who speak for themselves in relation to the services they offer. I think I would begin by saying that supplier onboarding is without doubt the most important success factor in e-invoicing. Of course, there are challenges associated with making sure that the buyers or the contracting authorities are prepared to receive and process e-invoices, but the success factor that makes it all work is the supplier onboarding. And this, as has been said by Christian and many of my colleagues, other service providers, is a key task of these service platforms. This whole thing can be done by public sector gateways. I think Christian said it, that it's better really to have an interoperable, reusable connection that can cover not only B2B, B2G. Most of my members have their background actually in B2B, so good news for Irena. B2B is alive and well. We need to ramp it up, and we need to address the issues surrounding these tax measures that are in the middle of being introduced in many places. So when we talk about the service platform, it is that platform that is the onboarding focus for this business. And a choice of channels is important: file transfer, portal, API. It's that first mile where the supplier, the small supplier, the micro, the bigger SME, has its first connection or contact with the world of e-invoicing. So it's got to be easy to use. It must provide some absolutely best practice functionality. And I notice already somebody's asked the question, connecting it also to the wider supply chain. So more and more of the members of ISPA are not only processing e-invoicing, but also the purchase orders and also the link to the payment process. So that's the first step, is create the invoice. This should be really easy. And for those micro enterprises, they certainly shouldn't be having to download software. They should be able to provide their invoice data to the service platform and then have peace of mind that a compliant invoice will be created and forwarded. And the second angle, of course, is that the service platform must connect to others to deliver interoperability and seamless delivery end to end. And most service providers connect and navigate various channels. We've heard about some of these. Of course, within ISPA, we have our own model agreements for interoperability. Very large numbers of transactions are exchanged bilaterally between service providers within the ISPA network. We've talked about PEPL a lot, and PEPL, of course, is a clear channel in which most service providers have a presence. But don't forget the national platforms like Chorus.po in France, SDI in Italy. These are also important. So the service platform becomes a navigator. So it's a creator and then a navigator. Transmission can be a challenge. Christian's put his finger on it. Nobody's saying that this is a completely solved problem. But the good news is we do have the standards. We do have the standards for the delivery and the discovery, as we call it, the directories. And CEF delivery, which is a product under the curating of the European Commission, is really good. And it's open standards. And in addition, we've talked about the EN and we've talked about governance. And we've recently published a group. It's not ISPA on its own. ISPA, together with PEPL and together with two US North American organizations, have produced something called the Global Interoperability Framework, which is a blueprint or a design for interoperable networks. And it's not only, of course, for use around the world, but also within Europe. We need to deliver the benefits to the smaller suppliers. It's absolutely vital. It would not be correct to ignore the long tail, because then we don't get the benefit into B2B and B2G at the same time. We do not get the benefit of public procurement. This is a public good. It must be supported as a policy. And the network effects are vital, and cost structures are mitigated by network effects. And just one final point, the sort of discussion that was going on earlier about training, education, cooperation, not just competition, is very vital in a network industry to create the sort of effects that we're looking to do. That's a fairly general set of remarks. Talk to my members, look at our website, talk to the PEPL community, talk to the other communities in interoperability, and we can make all of this happen relatively easily. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Charles. So now, again, Caroline will take the lead and read the questions for our speakers in the chat. Again, please feel free to share some comments. It doesn't have to be a question for the speakers to react.
Indeed, thank you, Selena, and thank you again to all speakers here. So I'll start with indeed the questions in the chat box, but as Selena said, please feel free to continue the conversation and commenting also. So the first question was for Jürgen. So in your opinion, do you see service providers enlarging their offer to e-ordering or e-payment services or any other e-procurement step?
Yes, certainly there are tendencies in that way. Particularly, for example, the example of the Flemish government, who is also doing some proofs of concept on e-ordering, an extension of the PEPL support and the PEPL thing they are doing. So it's actually happening. I'm aware also of the e-payments. The e-payment going along in the Scandinavian countries. So that's also something we see happening. But in Belgium, I don't know about initiatives on e-payment right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say if someone else wants to add their input.
Yeah, Charles here, the bridge between the supply chain automation, e-invoicing, e-ordering, etc., and the bridge into the payment side is extremely important, of course, and quite well established in the sense that the invoice usually then forms the trigger for the creation of a payment, which is often generated inside another part of an organization. But nevertheless, there are tendencies within the industry to look carefully at this interchange between supply chain and payment. There is a recent development of something called a request to pay message at the level of ISO, which the banks are quite interested in, and this would bring some integration between those two worlds. So I think you need to watch this space. I think there will be development in the payment arena involving both sides of the market.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you again, Jürgen.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Can I add something on this, Soline?
Yes.
Because I can speak also for the SMEs on the receiving end. There I see some initiatives and certainly the platforms making themselves ready to do real e-payment. So from within the platform where the accountant and the SME work together, there are a lot of e-payment possibilities coming along. So that's a good evolution, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Definitely worth checking also that topic. Then I will move quickly to the question that was addressed to Bojan. So what are the main challenges faced by SMEs when implementing e-invoicing, as you are directly in contact with the business actors?
Yes, so I think I mentioned already a couple of things earlier. Everything boils down to a couple of key points, primarily the resistance to change. Generally, people are afraid of new technology. There is a lack of trust. Somebody mentioned earlier that you have senders on one side being worried whether their invoices are going to go to the right spot, right place. And then you have receivers on the other side being worried whether they're going to receive everything they need to. Then there is this layer of technical, let's say, challenge. So how would that data travel from one system to another when they're completely incompatible? So that's where service providers like ourselves come in the game. If you think about it, invoice data is created digitally, it's sourced digitally, and then it ends up in a digital way as well. So that gap in between is what e-invoicing tries to solve, and it's an interest of both supplier and the buyer for that piece of chain to be as short as possible. Payments, as Charles mentioned as well, are kind of an interesting point, and if that actually provides an incentive further on for suppliers to kind of push the onboarding, as well as try to expect from their partner side to come to the table and discuss on how to close the whole order to cash cycle. Again, there is this resistance to change is also affected with this asymmetrical implementation process, which if one side has implemented specific standard and ways to do it, usually doesn't work well if they try to impose the same thing on the other side, who may have, let's say, implemented something completely different. And that kind of miscommunication between the partners in the supply chain usually create a little bit of friction. So when service providers come in the game, they actually have this, let's say, an airbag approach where they kind of absorb all that shock from both sides, and then communication between additionally service providers, I think, would definitely bring extra value to the whole process.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious of the time, and so I have a question for Daniel. but I would invite you to reply quite quickly if possible, because you mentioned the lack of legacy. And so in countries such as Romania. So I was wondering whether you could elaborate a little bit, as this can be seen as an advantage to encourage the SMEs to start sending and also receiving invoicing, electronic invoices.
Thank you. I strongly believe that it can be transformed into advantage. It can be transformed by both the national authorities as well as the private industry working together. That's the only way. Otherwise, the lack of legacy means also the lack of education, and it could drag along. However, the speed on which the novel technical solutions and processes can be built is much accelerated by this building from the ground up, while it's extremely important for a cooperation in between the stakeholders. Otherwise, is just going to take long. That cooperation is the key, and yes, lack of legacy can become an advantage.
Thank you, Daniel. I think we are already reaching the end of this second Q&A session. I'm looking at Selene here.
Yeah.
You take us through. Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for the questions. And as I'm sure Selene will say, we'll take the others offline, of course. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, we will collect all the questions and comments and react to it. So now, so thanks a lot to all the speakers present here today. Now I will just close the session together with you, mentioning the CEF achievement as well as the services. So as mentioned at the beginning, so this session today is part of following the scope of the CEF e-invoicing online strategy. So here are the achievements that we have realized so far and the next step that we've foreseen. So this session today is actually the second one of the series. So the first session was in June 20, and it was about invoicing transmission, a little bit about onboarding as well, and then about the maintenance of the standard, the European standard of e-invoicing. Then based on this session, so we co-wrote actually an article about e-invoicing transmission and transport infrastructure. This article is now available on CEF Digital. As an article, we mainly took inspiration and used your inputs that you shared initially as stakeholders in the user community, but also the outputs of the open session. Charles, who is here today, was also a co-author of this article, as well as Céline Sautreau, who could not be present today, but representing France when it comes to e-invoicing. And then today, the open session about onboarding that was also built mainly on your inputs and your participation received as the user community. So now the next step for us is about gathering all your questions and comments in the chat and reply to them. And we will share soon the summarizing all of this. And then a quick overview of the CEF invoicing services. So the first, let's say these are the four main. The first one is about the online country workshops. So those workshops are delivered by Christian Rasmussen, who you heard about today, and Martin. So the goal of this workshop is actually to provide government representatives and sometimes in this.
We just lost the sound from Selene.
We wait for 20 more seconds, 30 more seconds, and if Selene is not, we don't get her back, I'll take the lead for the closing.
Okay, perfect, Irina.
Okay, I can't hear Selene yet. Okay, I'd like to tell you a few words. I would have liked to tell you a few words. Now I'm on video too. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you.
Good, perfectly fine. I wanted to wrap up a little bit on what we have heard today, because we saw that people and many countries on onboarding are working, and on onboarding or readiness are working on next steps. What does it mean? Is it completely optimistic? I think it's, however, optimistic. Everybody is engaged into a process of doing, and we have seen that in many cases onboarding is active but not efficient. And how happened onboarding in member states? Onboarding happened through accounting, as in Belgium, through transport, as in Sweden, everybody had to be on a network, through taxation, as in Italy, and through mandatory B2G. This is one solution. I would say also that onboarding happens on standards, and because of the standards that we have put in place. And of course, the major role of service provider. I'd like to thank so much to Danielle.
Irena, you went on mute.
I want to unmute somebody. It went automatically on mute. I don't know what happened.
Okay, but we hear you fine again. We hear you fine.
Again,
please
very
continue.
good. So I would like to thank so much to Lars, to Danielle, to Bojan, to Jürgen, to Charles. They're all dynamic, young in spirit, and very wonderful people. And we'll stay together on the community. Why? Because we have all of us an objective, which is the mass adoption of e-invoicing. And we have to reap benefits of that. And there is a role for all in all that. There's a role for the public administration, there is a role for the service provider, there's a role for the suppliers. And clearly the Commission cannot do that alone. Clearly even the national governments in each member state cannot do that at all. Even they have a major role there in giving guidelines and creating education, creating awareness. But it will be you, service providers, your partners, who will create invoicing and make it a reality. And to wrap up, before really thanking everybody for being here, I will tell you what I am thanking my team for ensuring a very nice session, and to all the speakers. What I loved most, I loved also what Danielle was saying about costs. Indeed, costs for SMEs, they could be zero. And indeed, I had heard Charles mentioning e-invoicing as a public good. He was referring to something there. The incentives are very important for onboarding on SMEs. And I have heard also what I think it was Bojan who was speaking of a connected network of networks, connected to a network of networks. So these are my main takeaways. I really loved the conversation. I enjoyed your questions. I love this moment, and I learned something from it. I hope you have too, and I wish you a really lovely day and a lovely week for the end of the week. And I give you a rendezvous on the online community. There we keep the discussion going and we keep the work going. Bye bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think Salene is back. Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't honestly know where. But if I can just conclude on the operational side. So the recording and slides of the session will be available on the event page that you used to register. Also, we will share with you a satisfaction survey in the chat. So please feel free to share your comments and feedback and suggestions for the next session. And again, here I think you can on the screen appearing the different services that remain available. And I hope to see your comments and a conversation going on the user community. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. It was a pleasure today. Thanks to the speakers and to my dear colleague here present in the call. Thank you.